One of the challenges of using slash commands along with other inputs is that we have to validate our text. So for example, you can see here in our help section for our currency converter here, if I type in XE, then my expected currency conversion is an amount, then a from currency code and a to currency code with a colon in the middle. So for example, if I put in to AUD to USD, I expect to get back my currency. However, there might be some circumstances where our users might put a space after the to for neatness, or something they're used to, or space between these two colons, up to 3 spaces, for example. So we want to try and catch those and still enable the user to run a currency conversion. Alternatively, if they've missed out one of the parts of the currency conversion, so for example, the to currency code is missing, and they hit enter, then we want to return back an error message. So this missing currency 3-letter code colon. So another case might be if they're missing, for example, the amount, and just put in AUD to USD, for example. We need an error code reporting back no amount detected, so they know what they need to do, along with instructions on how to complete the task as well. One final issue that we might face is if the user puts in a wrong currency code. So for example, if I type in 1 AUX colon PPP, and both those codes don't exist. So if I type that in, we want to be able to, instead of going to the API and wasting our API response credits, we're just going to reference our list that we made in our previous tutorial and check if they exist before we go ahead and reference our API. So I'm going to hit enter again. And then we can see here, error no source currency, please check from the XE list. Cool. So if you haven't figured it out already, this tutorial is part of the How to Build a Currency Converter chat app with Google Apps Script series. We're about 3 or 4 tutorials into this series at the moment. If you want to go back to the previous tutorial, there's a link that will appear above, or if you want to go back to the start of this tutorial series, you can check out the link in the description below. Also in the description below, there's a link to the written tutorial along with code snippets for what we're working on for this stage of the current project and previous code snippets in different stages of the project. On top of that, there's also explanations on some of the more trickier parts of the code as well. So if you've got your code from the previous tutorial up and ready, let's dive into creating some data validation. Okay, so let's head over to our slash commands. And in our attempt conversion, we can make some updates here. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to type in a constant variable called conversion. This is going to hold all the conversion data we need to send to be converted. And that's going to run a function. So let's go down here and create that function. And that function name is going to be validate and retrieve currencies and amount. And our parameter for that will be a text. So it's going to be the text that we receive from the message when the XE command is executed. If you remember back a few tutorials and we head back to our code.js file, when the user types in the XE command, that's going to send the message text to us to use to make our conversion if we can. If not, we're going to validate it and throw back some errors. Okay, let's finish off that function structure and hit enter. And over here, let's just copy this. Let's just copy a lot, Control C and Control V. Cool. So the next stage in the next tutorial would be to make the currency conversion. However, we want to test this, so we're going to change this return slightly this time around. And what this conversion is going to throw back is a if success. It's going to throw back an object. Otherwise, it's going to throw back a string with the error in it. So let's just handle that with our return so we can see it on our messenger when we muck around. And what we'll do is we'll just use a ternary operator and say type of and conversion, and that's going to be equal to a string. So if it's equal to a string, question mark, we want to just chuck in the conversion because that'll be an error. And if it's not, we want to JSON stringify conversion. So that conversion object that's going to be thrown back. I've got an extra curly brace here. Let's get rid of that. Should be okay there. All right, so let's have a look at our validation now. So there's a few things we need to look at in our text. So our validation is basically going to be like this. So we're going to look for an amount. We need to extract that amount. And then we also need to extract the from and to codes here. So the first thing we'll do is we will extract the amount. And we'll make a constant variable here called amount. And then let's make an immediately evoked anonymous function. Yep, big word, but basically it means we're going to create an anonymous function that runs and executes straight away. We're going to create our curly braces. Inside that, we'll make an arrow function like so without an argument. And then we'll put some curly braces in because it'll be on more than one line. And then we'll close that off to make sure that it executes perfectly. Okay, what we want to do here is return back either an error or return back the amount we extracted from the string of data we get from our text. We also want to do the same thing with our currencies. So let's just say extract currencies as object. Cool. And we'll say const currencies, and that's going to be equal to the same thing. So brackets for our argument. There's an empty argument in there for our arrow function, and then some curly braces to make sure it's on the new line, and immediately executable with our other outer brackets. Good. All right, gang, so are you sitting down? Because what I'm going to tell you next is pretty serious, and that's we're going to be using regular expressions. Yep, I know, regular expressions. But they're going to be extremely useful for this, and the most efficient way, I think, that we can extract the data that we need. So, what are we going to do first for our amount? What do we need to extract exactly? So let's make a const called regex inside the amount function. And that's going to be equal to our regular expression. So to make our regular expression, we're going to use a pair of forward slashes. And we're going to put things in brackets that we want returned. So that indicates what needs to be returned. And what are we looking for in our square brackets here? In our square brackets, we need to look for anything that is a digit. And we can do that with the /D. And then we want to look for anything that has a full stop or a decimal and anything that has a comma. We need to look for that n number of times. We don't really have a limit of how many times we want to look for that number. We just want to create an entire number that possibly has decimals and commas in there, and then extract that, and then we'll handle any issues that are involved in that first. So what do I mean here? So what could we have that would have decimals and numbers? So if I had a number that had 1,000, and sometimes people use a comma to separate the 1,000 breaks, particularly in English. And then we could put another bunch of zeros, put a comma in, another bunch of zeros, and then a decimal, and then a couple more zeros, and then we're done. So we need to collect all of this data here. Now, at the moment, we're not handling a weird situation when someone accidentally puts in a full stop here, but we'll sort that out in a moment. Cool. So now we've got our regex. Let's create another variable, a constant variable called text amount. And that's going to be equal to text, and that's our text we're drawing in here from our chat that comes in, and we want to match this data here, X. This is not a bad spot to start building out our little test function for this. Let's go over to test here, and we'll say function validation underscore test. A bit nice and sweet. Okay, so let's make a constant called list, and that's going to be an array, and that's going to contain all our test items as strings. So first test item will say, they'll all start with an XE. We'll make this one 2. Another one, XE 3,432 dollars and 15 cents. So those should be successful. Let's run another one. Well, everything should be successful at the moment. XE 4, 5 decimal 4 decimal 4, and then let's make another one. If we say XE $44.50, and then we'll go AUD, USD. Let's put another number in here and see what happens. Okay, did something weird up here. Oh, didn't put a comma here. Cool. Nice, and let's go list dot for each item in the list. And what do we want to do for each item? Well, we want to go back to our slash commands and we want to run our validation, don't we? Back to our test. Bang, item. I say const result equals console.log result. Save again. Let's hit run now. Okay, so we've got our result here, but we're not returning anything from our validation at the moment. So let's just say for now, amount. And it's also return text amount. Hit save. So the text amount, once it's found the match, it's going to be stored in amount, and then we're going to return amount from this validate and retrieve currencies and amount. And that's going to go back to our test and log the result. Cool bananas. So the match here for the first time, it stores 2, good, and the second time it's going to store the correct number. This will also store the number, but we know it's weird. We'll have to validate that in a moment. Here it's storing the $44.50. Now if I drag this down a little bit, you can see that we've also got this $45 on this side. So it's looking at it for the first time. So if we put a G here, that will make it global and it will check for every instance of that, but we only want the first instance of it. So it's doing the right thing there. Okay, cool. So we also know that we just want to grab the 0th item of this text amount array as well. Cool, let's head back to our slash commands. And one thing we could test beforehand, which I neglected to have, xe will make blank. And then let's also do /xe EUR to USD. Hit save. Oh, I didn't put a comma here. Hit save. Let's hit run again and just check those last two conditions. Cool. So in those last two conditions, they're reporting back null, which is exactly right because there is no number in there. Back in our slash commands, we can see that for the match on the text, if there is nothing in there, the match method will return null. Okay, so we can work with this at the moment. So let's handle that bit first. And let's say if no number return error. Cool, this is going to be our first error to return. If not text amount, so if text amount is false or null, then return, and let's put in a message for the user. It's going to be error, and we'll say error, no amount detected. That should be okay. And let's add 2 spaces. And then let's also add in our error instructions, which we can find in our globals here. Isn't that convenient? So let's select that and hit Control V, paste. Awesome. Hit save. Now if we run this test again, these last 2 items should return back that error. Yep, cool. Error no amount detected, error no amount detected with our little instructions as well. Okay, so what's the next test condition here? What happens if we have that more than 1 decimal place? If you remember back in our test item here, we went a bit loco and put in 2 decimal places here, which is not necessarily correct, particularly in English currencies. So let's head back to our commands here and let's make a note. So let's handle more than 1 decimal. So that's going to confuse us and break things, isn't it? Okay, so we need to say if in another set of braces inside here, and we're looking at the text amount remember the text amount returns an array. So let's look at our execution logs, and we just want the 0th item in each one of the arrays that we're examining. So let's go 0 here. And then we want to match again. And it's a fairly simple match. So let's forward slash, and then we'll go backslash decimal point. So we want to match an item with a decimal point. And we want to do that for all items available. So we want to get a global list of all of the items available there. So we're not matching the original text here. We're matching the text amount. So only the text values, commas, and decimal points. Okay, so once we have that, now on the condition that there are no decimal places in the amount, then it's going to throw an error. So we can put in a or statement here and just an empty array. And just let's wrap that text amount up now, and let's look for the length here. So the length is going to produce a string of decimals. So if there's 2 decimal places in there, it's going to look like that. Now we know if the length is greater than 1, there's going to be problems. So if the length is greater than 1, we want to return an error. So return, we'll say error, decimal, overload, 3 redonkulous exclamation marks. And then we'll say 1 or none, please. And put in a couple of new lines. And then we'll add our error instructions in there. Oh, it's a bit too wide. Just put an enter in there. Should be okay now. And hit save. Cool, let's go back to our test. And let's just add in an extra one just for good testing measures. So we'll say xc100.1010, comma 44. And we'll actually put in a AUD to USD value here. And make sure we've got a comma at the end. Nice. Cool. And let's just make it easier on ourselves and just report back also the item. Item plus a little space in there. I'll put a colon. And we'll add another little plus symbol so it concatenates it together. Cool. Let's hit save and run. Nice. So now these 2 conditions should throw this new error. And then we've got this error decimal overload, and that's on this one with those 2 extra decimal places. And then there's the same with this one. Just to check this, we can use more than one. Let's put another decimal place in there. Save and run it again, just so you know that it's not a fluke. Cool. Error decimal overload. Good. That's handled. Let's head back to our slash commands. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is just check to see if someone hasn't gone a bit bonkers and put in a huge number. So let's make this one check for redonkulous. Length. Cool. And we'll say if the text amount of the item length, so this is the amount length, is greater than say 21 characters. So that could be on either side, so you could have 10 numbers plus 10 decimal numbers. That'd be totally fine, or 20 numbers in general. So if it's greater than 20 numbers, then we want to throw an error. Why might we want to do this? In some circumstances, maybe our API might not be able to handle those larger numbers. In other circumstances, there are limits to your number length when running JavaScript. So it's probably a good idea to just reduce that down. And to be honest, there are going to be very few instances where someone is going to need a number larger than this. So let's return our error. And we'll say, whoa, but that's some crazy moolah. Let's put in some money emojis. Yeah, money bags. 2. Cool. Copy that 3 times because they are the money bags. Full stop. And it's too much for me to comprehend. Exclamation mark again, because they are indeed redonkulous. Okay, let's add in our error instructions again. Cool. Nice. Okay, so let's head back to our test. And let's make another test here. So xe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Let's copy that. So we'll make another test. And we'll say, we'll add a 1 to the end. We'll put a decimal in. And the last two in our list should return that new error. So let's hit run again. Let's hit run again, see what happens. Oh, mistake. Let's go back to our slash commands. Length. This is my own personal daemon here. Let's try that again. There we go. We've got a big number here. Oh, it's probably miscalculated. Let's add in an extra 0. So we've already got put another 0. See what happens. Yeah, there we go. Well, bud, some crazy moolah. It's too much for me to comprehend. Let's go for it again. Nice. We can add in a bunch more if we wanted. Cool. All right, that's most of the error handling for the amount. So just a bit of tidying up now. So what we need to do next is remove the commas inside the number and pass it as a float. So let's go remove commas and pass as a float. Cool. So to do that, we can use const here, and we'll make a new variable called float amount. And let's just change what we're going to return to float amount. And that's going to be equal to pass float. And then we'll get our text amount again, position 0 of the array, and we want to replace all. So replace all, and comma here, and we just want to replace it with nothing. So replace any comma inside this pass float with nothing. Cool. And then that's going to return our float amount. Let's hit save now and go back to our test. There's a few items in here with commas. This is a legit one that will return properly with a comma. And this one doesn't have a comma, which is fine. It should be returned as well. So let's run again. Cool. So let's look at these first two items. That runs back as 2, and this runs back as a float with 15 in it, and that comma is now missing. Fantastic. That's what we wanted. And this will cover multiple conditions where there's more than one comma, so we should probably test for that as well. So let's just add another one in here. XE, $1,500.23. Whack in a comma, hit run. Cool. So both those conditions, the commas have been removed, and that's all prepped up ready to be sent to the API for the amount. All right, back to our slash commands. So at the end of our slash command to get for our amount, we don't actually want to return the amount straight away. We need to handle this currencies, but we do want to return it on the condition there's an error. So we're not wasting our computation time looking through the currencies if we've already found an issue with an error. Instead of this statement here, let's change that to if type of amount is equal to string, then return amount. Otherwise, hold your horses. Let's work on currencies. So what's going on here? Why won't that return this float amount? Because it's returning a floating point number instead of the error strings here. Nice. Let's work on currencies. So currencies is a little bit more confusing with the regular expression, but we will do it. We'll handle it anyway. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the currencies between the colon. For example, AUD to USD. Okay. We want to be a little bit flexible too, and we want to allow for up to 3 spaces between the code and the colon. Okay, so if a user puts in AD space colon 123 USD, it's still going to capture AD in USD. But if they go a little bit more crazier with an extra 4 spaces, it's not. So it just gives us an opportunity to work around human preference or human error and still report back to please our user. Okay, our regular expression, so const regex is equal to, and this one is a fairly big one, so we're going to / here, and we want to look for anything between an A and a Z in the alphabet, and if they've gone a bit silly and used lowercase, we want to look for that as well, and Z in the alphabet. That has to be 3 letters exactly, precisely here. Then we want to look to see if there's any spaces, and we can use the S command for this. And here we can look for any space between 0 amount of spaces between the colon and up to 3 amounts of spaces up to the colon. Then we want to look for the colon. And again, we want to look for spaces again. So we'll make a little space, so backslash S for space. And then again, we want to look for between 0 and 3 spaces. That's permitted. Then we want to look for our 3 letters again. So A to Z, or A to Z, lowercase. And that has to be precisely 3 letters at the end there. So if we find an item that has 3 spaces, 2 spaces, 1 space here, but still looks like this, or 3 spaces, 2 spaces, 1 space, or a couple of spaces like this, then we're going to allow it, and we want to capture that in our match. So let's make another constant called currency group, and that's going to be equal to the text.match and regex again. Oh, regex. Perfect. First validation thing we need to do is just to check if this match exists. If not, we need to throw back an error. So if exclamation currency group, so if there is null, if it returns null, then we want to return error and say missing 3-letter, we'll put a colon there, letter, currency, code, or colon. And we'll explain what a colon is, because not everyone knows. And then we'll put in a couple new lines, and then our error instructions. Control-C, Control-V, hit save. Cool, let's just go over and let's do what we did last time so we can test things. So return currencies. Cool. So now when we run our test, it's only going to return anything that has an error with the amount, or anything that has an error that we find with the currencies. So let's head back to our test here. And let's actually tidy this up. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. We don't need that one either. And we don't need that one because that's handled as well. So this one should be correct. This one should be incorrect, incorrect, and incorrect. So let's just save and run. Cool. So missing 3-letter for the first one, missing 3-letter for the second one, missing 3-letter for the third one. We've got an undefined here, but that's for good reason because we haven't turned the currency group, which is okay. So our currency group is going to return something like this. We need to extract the source currency and the destination currency. So let's do that. So we need to match 3-letter currency code. Cool. So let's go const regex currency. And this time, all we need is the occurrence of this one. So let's just copy this over. And that was basically any 3 digits that are uppercase or lowercase from A to Z. And let's close off that and let's make that global because we're going to pick up both of those items. Nice. And then we'll say cons cur for currency equals currency group. And we want to look inside the currency group array that we returned up here. And we need to match our reg x currency, this one here. Nice. Okay, so once we have that, let's fit those inside an object to make our life easier when reading things. So we're const currency is equal to, let's make an object, and we're going to have a source, and that's going to be equal to cur, and we're going to use our cur, and our first item in our currency is going to be, it should be this one, and our second item in our currency array should be this one. So let's make them all uppercase to prepare them for the API. So to uppercase, and then destination, cur, to uppercase. Cool, so now we've got our source and destination objects there. Let's make a bit of space so we can stretch out. Now we need to validate if the currency codes are available. And instead of pinging the API every time and wasting our credit, we're just going to go over and reference our currency code list here and make sure they're available in this list. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So the first one, so our note is we need to validate if currency codes are available. And we'll say if it's not in the, here it is, currency codes object, and it doesn't have the property, has own property, and that's going to be currency dot source. So if currency source isn't available in the currency pro, doesn't have this property, then it's yuck. So we need to return an error. So return, we can be a bit more helpful here. So we'll use backticks here for our template literals. And we'll say error, no source currency with the code. And we'll put in a little $, curly braces, currency dot source. And we'll just put in a backslash so it keeps everything on the same line. And we'll say, please check the xe.list to see what currencies are available. And again, we'll add in our error instructions. Be super duper helpful. Okay, so now you probably noticed that what's this XE list? We haven't created that. We'll be making that in 2 more tutorials time. And that will provide the user with a list of all the currencies that they can easily see so they can reference in future. Cool. Let's basically duplicate this. And instead of the source, we want the destination here. So we can double click that, hit Control D and Control D, because we can rewrite all 3 of those items. We'll call it destination property. Cool. So we've got error, no destination currency with the code, blah, blah. However, if everything else is okay though, all we want to do is return the currency object. Cool. We'll hit save there. All right, let's go back to our test now and put in a couple of new measures. So let's just duplicate this. And let's make AUX, because we know that's weird. And we'll make this one PPP. I think They'll be okay. We've handled for missings, so we can get rid of that for now. So we've got, this will be okay, this will be an error, and this will be an error. And let's just save that for now. Are we going to return this? Let's just go back to /commands very quickly. Return currencies. Yeah, we're going to return that. So this will return either an object or it's going to return one of these error conditions. And we should have already handled for this error condition, so it should just return one of these two. Go back to our test and hit run. Okay, so the first one, yep, that returned objects. That was successful. That's what we expected here. And then our AUX should be wrong. So let's see what the error says. No source currency with the code AUX. Cool. Please check the XE list. And then for our next item, it was the destination one that was wrong. So yep, no destination currency with PPP. Check the XE list. Cool. I think what we might do here is just bold these ones too in our response. And I don't like this space. So let's just tidy that up quickly. I think I'll just make it on a new line. And let's put some markdown bold stars next to those, so that will return nicely in our message. Okay, so just a little bit to go. Just like up here with our amount, we want to check for a string, and if it's a string, it'll be an error. Otherwise, we're going to return an object. Let's just go enter here. So we'll say if type of currencies is equal to string, then we know it's an error, so we'll return the currencies. Otherwise, we won't do anything yet. But what we'll do next is we will say const conversion, and this is going to, now we're going to make an object out of our amount and also our two currency objects. And let's make this object, and we'll use the spread operator here, and we'll just add in our currencies, and then we'll add in the amount. And that's going to make the keys for this currencies source and destination, and then the other key will be the amount, and then the value will be value amount. And we just need to return that now back here. Cool. Let's hit save. Let's go back to our test. Just run it one more time through testing. Cool. And that returns back our object still. Everything's still fine here. Let's run a test through deployment now. So let's go ahead and up to deploy, manage deployments, and then edit and change our version. So new version. What did we do? We made some text validation and hit deploy. Hopefully in a couple of weeks' time after recording this, we'll be able to access the head deployment and not have to make a new deployment each time. Okay, so let's go back to our chat here and head into our currency converter and just make sure we're doing everything right. So let's try XZ and just XE, see what happens. Error, no amount detected. Cool. So let's go XE, $22. Error, missing 3-letter currency code. Cool. What about if we go XE, a big scramble of lots and lots of monies, AUD to USD. Well, bud, some crazy moolah. Nice. And we've got instructions. Cool. What about if we go XE, let's do it correctly this time. So with $34.44, and we'll say USD to EUR, hit enter. Cool. So this is just spitting back information that we have at the moment. We're not sending it away to the API yet. Okay, so what if we grab this again and make something, we'll say EEE, don't think that exists. Cool. So that returning back error, no destination currency with the code, blah, blah. Please check the XE list. Nice. Let's do another one quickly. So 333, comma, 444, full stop, 555, full stop, 666, full stop, couple full stops, 5, AUD to EUR, hit enter. Error, decimal overload. Cool. So let's try another one. If I type in $12.50 space AUD space colon space EUR. Let's see what happens. Cool, it still maintains it because remember, we're working with the user here and giving a bit of allowance for spaces. That's all our validation for now for our exe commands, and now we can send that data over to the API. And then the API is going to return back our currency conversion, and then we're going to return that currency conversion back to our message to replace this with the conversion information. And all that is in our next tutorial. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that like button. If you want to see more tutorials along these lines, hit that subscribe. And if you want to get a notification when the next tutorial in this series comes out, hit that notification bell. Until next time.